Good afternoon, Carl. Um, Here's the second of the stories that I'm going to be going through with you. You said you wanted to see pages, so I've turned them into a sort of a book for these stories that you can read. Read along if you want, and I hope this helps you with learning to read as well. Okay, this story is called The 12 Dancing Princesses. Once upon a time there lived in the village of Montagne-sur-Roc a little cowboy without either father or mother. His real name was Michael, but he was always called the Stargazer, because when he drove his cows over the commons to seek for pasture, he went along with his head in the air, gaping at nothing. As he had a white skin, blue eyes, and hair that curled all over his head, the village girls used to cry after him, "Well, Stargazer, what are you doing?" And Michael would answer, "Oh, nothing," and go on his way without even turning to look at them. The fact he thought them very ugly, with their sunburned necks, great red hands, their coarse petticoats and wooden shoes. He had heard somewhere in the world there were girls whose necks were white and whose hands were small and always dressed in the finest silks and laces, and they were called princesses. And while his companions round the fire saw nothing in the flames but common everyday fancies, he dreamed that he had the happiness to marry a princess. So one morning in about the middle of August, just about midday when the sun was hottest, Michael ate his dinner of a piece of dry bread and went to sleep under an oak. And when he slept, he dreamt that there appeared before him a beautiful lady, dressed in a robe of cloth of gold, who said to him, "Go to the castle of Belleoil, and there you shall marry a princess." That evening, the little cowboy, who had been thinking a great deal about the advice of the lady in the golden dress, told his dream to the farm people, but, as only natural, they laughed at the stargazer. The next day at the same hour he went to sleep again under the same tree. The lady appeared to him a second time and said, "Go to the castle of Belleoil, and you shall marry a princess." In the evening, Michael told his friends that he had dreamed the same dream again, but they only laughed at him the more before. "Never mind," he thought to himself. "If the lady appears to me a third time, I will do as she tells me." The following day, to the great astonishment of all the village, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a voice was heard singing, "Oraleo, oraleo, how the cattle go." It was a little cowboy driving his herd back to the byre. The farmer began to scold furiously, but answered quietly, "I'm going away." And he made his clothes into a bundle, said goodbye to all his friends, and boldly set out to seek his fortune. There was a great excitement throughout the village, and on the top of the hill the people stood holding their sides with laughter as they watched the stargazer trudging bravely along the valley with his bundle at the end of his stick. It was enough to make anyone laugh, certainly. It was well known for full 20 miles round that there lived in the castle of Belleoil 12 princesses of wonderful beauty, and as proud as they were beautiful, and who were besides so very sensitive and such truly royal blood that they would have felt at once the presence of a pea in their beds, even if the mattresses had been laid over it. It was whispered that they led exactly the lives that princesses ought to lead, sleeping far into the morning and never getting up until midday. They had 12 beds, all in the same room. What was very extraordinary was the fact that though they were locked in by triple bolts, every morning their satin shoes were found worn to holes. When they were asked what they'd been doing all night, they always answered they'd been asleep, and indeed no one was ever heard in the room. Yet the shoes could not wear themselves out alone. At last the Duke of Belleoil ordered the trumpet to be sounded and a proclamation to be made that whoever could discover how his daughters wore out their shoes, he could choose one of them for a wife. On hearing the proclamation, a number of princes arrived at the castle to try their luck. They watched all night behind the open door of the princesses, but when the morning came, they had all disappeared, and no one could tell what happened. So when he reached the castle, Michael went straight to the garden and offered his services. Now it happened that the garden boy had been sent away, and although the stargazer did not look very sturdy, the gardener agreed to take him, as he thought that his pretty face and golden curls would please the princesses. The first thing he did, he was told, was that when the princesses got up, he was present each one with a bouquet. That's a large bunch of flowers, Carl. And Michael thought that if nothing more unpleasant to do, that he'd get on very well. Accordingly, he placed himself behind the door of the princesses' rooms with the 12 bouquets in a basket. He gave one to each of the sisters, and they took them without deigning to look at the lad, except Lena, the youngest, who fixed her large black eyes, as soft as velvet, on him and exclaimed, "Oh, how pretty he is, our new flower boy!" The rest all burst out laughing, and the eldest pointed out that the princess ought never to lower herself by looking at a garden boy. Now Michael knew very well what had happened to all the princes, but notwithstanding the beautiful eyes of Princess Lena inspired him with a violent longing to try his fate. Unhappily he did not dare come forward, being afraid that he should only be jeered at, or even turned away from the castle on account of his impudence. Impudence means cheekiness, Carl. Nevertheless, the stargazer had another dream. The lady in the golden dress appeared to him once more, holding in one hand 2 young laurel trees, a cherry laurel and a rose laurel, and the other hand a little golden rake, a little golden bucket, and a silken towel. And she addressed him thus: "Play at these 2 laurels in large two large pots, rake them over with the rake, water them with a bucket, and wipe them with a towel. When they've grown as tall as a girl of 15, say to each of them, "My beautiful Laurel, with the golden rake I have raked you, with the golden bucket I have watered you, with the silken towel I have wiped you. Then after that, ask anything you choose, and the laurels will give it to you." Michael thanked the lady in the golden dress, and he found 2 laurel bushes beside him, so he carefully obeyed the orders he'd been given by the lady. The trees grew very fast, and when they were as tall as a girl of 15, he said to the cherry laurel, "My lovely cherry laurel, with the golden rake I have raked thee, with the golden bucket I have watered thee, with the silken towel I have wiped thee. Teach me to become invisible." Then instantly appeared on the laurel a pretty white flower, which Michael gathered and stuck into his buttonhole. I have a buttonhole right about there, Carl. That evening, when the princesses went to bed, he followed them barefoot, so he might make no noise, and he hid himself under each one of the 12 beds, so as not to take up much room. The princesses began at once to open their wardrobes and boxes. They took on the most magnificent dresses, and they put on the mirrors, and before they had finished, they turned themselves round to admire their appearances. Michael could see nothing from his hiding place, but he could hear everything, and he listened to the princesses laughing and jumping with pleasure. At last the eldest said, "Be quick, our sisters, our partners will be impatient." Then of an hour, when the stargazer heard no more, he peeped out, and he saw 12 sisters in splendid garments, with the satin shoes at their feet, and in their hands the bouquets he had brought them. "Are you ready?" said the eldest. "Yes," replied the other 11 in chorus, and they took their places one by one behind her. Then the eldest princess clapped her hands 3 times, and a trapdoor opened, and the princesses disappeared down a secret staircase, and Michael hastened to follow them. As he was following on the steps of the Princess Lena, carelessly trod on her dress. "There is someone behind me," cried the princess. "They are holding my dress." "You foolish thing," said her little sister. "You're always afraid of something. It's only a nail which caught you." So they went down, 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 until at last they came to a passage with a door at one end, which was only fastened with a latch. The eldest princess opened it, and they found themselves immediately in a lovely little wood, where the leaves were spangled with drops of silver which shone in the brilliant light of the moon. They crossed another wood where the leaves were sprinkled with gold, and after that another still, where the leaves glittered with diamonds. At last Stargazer perceived a large lake, and on the shores of the lake 12 little boats with awnings, in which were seated 12 princesses, who, grasping at their oars, awaited the princesses. And each princess entered one of the boats, and Michael slipped into one which held the youngest, and the boats gliding along rapidly, but Lena's, from being heavier, always behind the rest. "We never went so slowly before," said the princess. "What can be the reason?" "I don't know," answered the prince. "I am rowing as hard as I can." On the other side of the lake, the garden boy saw a beautiful castle splendidly illuminated, when came the lively music of fiddles, kettle drums, and trumpets. In a moment they touched land, and the company jumped out of their boats, and the princes, having securely fastened their barks, gave their arms to the princesses and conducted them to the castle. Barks is an old word for boats, Carl. Michael followed and entered the ballroom in their train. Everywhere there were mirrors, lights, flowers, and damask hangings. The stargazer was quite bewildered at the magnificence of the sight. He placed himself out of the way in the corner, admiring the grace and beauty of the princesses. Their loveliness was of every kind. Some were very fair, and some were very dark. Some had chestnut hair, or curls dark as silk, and some had golden locks. Never were there so many beautiful princesses seen together at one time, but one whom the cowboy thought was most beautiful, most fascinating, was the little princess with the velvet eyes. With what eagerness she danced! Leaning on her partner's shoulder, she swept by like a whirlwind. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkled, and it was plain she loved dancing better than anything else. I just want to show you this, Carl. This is the Lord of the Dance, Nataraja. The poor boy envied those handsome young men with whom she danced so gracefully, but he did not know how little reason had to be jealous of them. The young men were really the princes who, to the number of 50 at least, had tried to steal in the prince's secret. The princesses had made them drink something of philter, that's a potion, which froze the heart and left nothing but love of dancing. They danced on till the shoes of the princesses were worn into holes. When the cock crowed the 3rd time, the fiddle stopped, and the delicious supper was served by boys, consisting of sugared orange flowers, crystallized rose leaf, powdered vials, cracknels, wafers, and other dishes, which are, as everyone knows, the favorite food of princesses. At supper the dancers went all back to their boats, and this time the stargazer entered that of the elder princess. They crossed again the wood with the diamond-spangled leaves, the wood with the golden sprinkled leaves, and the wood whose leaves glittered with drops of silver. As a proof of what he had seen, the boy broke a small branch of the tree in the wood. Lena turned as she heard the noise made by the breaking of the branch. "What was that noise?" she said. "It was nothing," replied eldest sister. "It was only the screech of the barn owl that roosts in the turrets of the castle." While she was speaking, Michael managed to slip in front, and running up the staircase, he reached the princess's room first. He flung open the window, and sliding down the vine which climbed up the wall, found himself in the garden just as the sun was beginning to rise, and it was time for him to set to his work. That day, when he made up the bouquets, Michael hid the branch with the silver drops in the nosegay intended for the princess. When Lena discovered it, she was much surprised. However, she said nothing to her sisters, but as she met the boy by accident when she was walking under the shade of the elms, she suddenly stopped as if to speak to him. Then, altering her mind, she went on her way. The same evening, 12 sisters went again to the ball, and the stargazer again followed them and crossed the lake in Lena's boat. This time it was the prince who complained that the boat seemed very heavy. It is the heat, replied the princess. I too have been feeling very warm. During the ball she looked everywhere for the gardener's boy, but she never saw him. As they came back, Michael gathered a branch from the wood with the gold spangled leaves, and now it was the eldest princess who heard the noise made in breaking. It is nothing, said Lena, only the cry of the owl which roosts in the turrets of the castle. As soon as she got up, Princess Lena found the branch in a bouquet. When the sisters went down, she said a little behind, said the cowboy, where does this branch come from? Your Royal Highness knows well enough, answered Michael. So have you followed us? Yes, Princess. How did you manage it? We never saw you. I hid myself, replied the stargazer quietly. Princess was silent a moment, then she said, you know our secret. Keep it. Here's a word of your discretion. She flung a boy a purse of gold. I do not sell my silence, answered Michael, and he went away without picking up the purse. For 3 nights, Lena neither saw nor heard anything extraordinary, and on the 4th she heard a rustling among the diamond-spangled leaves in the woods. That day there was a branch of the trees in a bouquet. She took the stargazer aside and said in a harsh voice, you know what price our fathers promised to pay for our secret? I know, Princess. Don't you mean to tell him? That is not my intention. Are you afraid? No, Princess. What makes you so discreet then? But Michael was silent. Lena's sisters, who had seen her talking to the little garden boy, jeered at her for it. That means they made fun of her. Well, Prince, you're marrying him, asked the eldest. You would become a gardener too. It's a charming profession. You could live in a cottage at the end of the park and help your husband draw up water from the well. And when we get up, you could always bring us up bouquets. The Princess Lena was very angry, and when the stargazer presented her bouquet, she received it in a disdainful manner. Michael behaved most respectfully. He never raised his eyes to her, but nearly all day she felt him at her side without ever seeing him. One day she made up her mind to tell everything to her eldest sister. What? Said she. This rogue knows our secret, and you never told me? I must lose no time in getting rid of him. But how? Why, having been taken to the Tower dungeons, of course. Well, this was the way in old times that beautiful princes got rid of people who knew too much. But the astonishing part of it was that the younger sister did not at all seem to relish this method of stopping the mouth of the gardener's boy, who, after all, had said nothing to their father. It was agreed that the question should be submitted to the other 10 sisters. All were on the other side of the eldest. Then the younger sister declared that if they laid a finger onto the little garden boy, she would go herself and tell her father the secret of the holes in the shoes. At last it was decided that Michael should be put to the test. They would take him to the ball, and at the end of the supper they would give him the file till that was enchanted like the rest. So they sent for the stargazer, asked him how he contrived to learn of the secret, but he remained silent. Then in commanding tones, the eldest sister gave him the order they agreed on. He only answered, I will obey. He had really been present, invisible at the council of the princesses, and heard all, but he had made up his mind to drink of the fount and sacrifice himself to the happiness of her whom he loved. Not wishing, however, to cut a poor fig in the ball by the side of other dancers, he went once to the other laurels and said, My lovely rose laurel, with the golden rake I have raked thee, with the golden bucket I have watered thee, with the silken towel I have dried thee. Dress me like a prince. A beautiful pink flower appeared, and Michael gathered it and found himself in moment clothed in velvet, which was as black as the eyes of the little princess, and with a cap to match, and a diamond aigrette, and a blossom of the rose laurel in his buttonhole. Thus dressed, he presented them that evening to the Duke of Belleisle, and obtained leave to try and discover his daughter's secret. He looked so distinguished that hardly anyone would have known who he was. The 12 princesses went upstairs to bed, and Michael followed them, and waited behind the open door till they gave the signal for departure. This time he did not cross in Lena's boat. He gave his arm to the eldest sister and danced with each in turn, and was so grateful that everyone was delighted with him. At last there came a time for him to dance with the little princess. She found him the best partner in the world, but did not dare speak a single word to her. When he was taking her back to her place, she said to him in a mocking voice, He hath the sum of your wishes, and you are being treated like a prince. Don't be afraid, replied the stargazer gently. You shall never be a gardener's wife. The little princess stared at him with a frightened face, and he left her without waiting for an answer. When the satin slippers were worn through, the fiddle stopped, and the boys set the table, and Michael was placed next to the elder sister and opposite the youngest. They gave him the most exquisite dishes to eat, and the most delicate wines to drink, and in order to turn his head more completely, compliments and flattery were heaped upon him from every side. But he took care not to be intoxicated either by the wine or the compliments. At last the elder sister made a sign, and one of the pages brought in a large golden cup. The enchanted castle has no more secrets for you, she said to the stargazer. Let us drink to your triumph. He cast a lingering glances at the little princess, and without hesitation lifted up the cup. Don't drink, suddenly cried out the little princess. I would rather marry a gardener. And she burst into tears. Michael flung the contents of the cup behind him, sprang over the table, and fell at Nina's feet. The rest of the princes fell likewise at the need of their princesses, each one of whom chose a husband and raised him to her side. The charm was broken. The 12 couples embarked on the boats and crossed back many times in order to cower over the other princess. They went through the 3 woods, and when they had closed the door of the underground passage, a great noise was heard, as if the enchanted castle was crumbling to earth. They went straight to the room of the Duke of Bellois, who had just woken. Michael held in his hand the golden cup and revealed the secret of the holes in the shoes. Choose then, said the Duke, whichever you prefer. My choice is already made, replied the garden boy, and he offered his hand to the youngest princess, who blushed and lowered her eyes. The Princess Lina did not become a gardener's wife. On the contrary, it was the stargazer who became a prince. But before the marriage ceremony, the princess insisted that her lover should tell how he came to discover the secret. So he showed her the 2 laurels which had helped him, and she, like a prudent girl, thinking they gave him too much advantage of his wife, cut them down at the root and threw them into the fire. And this is why the country girls go around singing Nous n'irons plus à bois, les lauriers sont coupés, and dancing in the summer by the light of the moon. The end, Carl. And I have no idea what that final one is, but it sounds good. Until tomorrow. Love you to bed.